After a big expansion and a number of massive changes to its systems and gameplay, Fallout 76 is actually good now. Just kidding, it's still broken, but how many times have you heard that story? Before we begin, we publish new content all week long, so be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. From Destiny 2 to The Division to No Man's Sky, at this point, the live service game X is good now headlines are becoming a cliche. Heck, we're guilty of it too. Anthem, the new third-person shooter from Mass Effect and Dragon Age developers BioWare, is the newest game in the live service space to be released to negative reviews at launch. The question is, will Anthem have the same redemption arc like so many games before it? And if it does, what should happen to its review scores? So what are the beats of this all too familiar story? First, live service game X releases to lukewarm reviews and probably earns between a 6 and a 7 on Metacritic. It lacks polish, reviewers will say. There's not enough content, cry the fans on the game's subreddit. Then, slowly and over time, the game's developers listen to critical complaints and fan outcry and begin to change what people don't like and add more of what people enjoy. Now, suddenly, there's plenty of polish and tons of content. A big ol' expansion drops, presenting an opportunity for players who abandoned the game, or players who never picked it up in the first place, to jump in and experience the game in its, quote, true form.
All right. Let's see what we've got.
It's a familiar tale, right? It might help to explain why games like Anthem and Fallout 76 are released when they clearly could use a few more months of development. The publishers see the exciting narrative in games culture of live service games making the rise from disappointment to cultural phenomenon, and think, we could release the game now and fix it in a few months. No big deal.
And the second Guardian has been greeted. Halfway there.
The result? Well, when reviewers get their hands on these kind of games, they're usually dealing with the shadow of what the game will eventually become. Nevertheless, they have to give it a score. But should they? Take Anthem as an example. It officially launched on February 22, 2019, but was available via EA Access on the 15th of February, a full week before its official launch, which is when many reviewers got their hands on the full game. And while our reviewer Jem, who acknowledged some of the game's shortcomings and issues, but otherwise liked Anthem, most other critics weren't impressed. But many will come to the game's defense, claiming, quote, these issues will be fixed in the future. Sure, that's probably true, but should games be reviewed for what they could become or for what they are? If publishers are comfortable putting out games that aren't fully formed, they have to anticipate that it will be treated as such by critics. Based on the feedback from players about bugs, long loading times, and more, EA released a so-called Day 1 patch for Anthem a day before the game's actual release. So really, it's a Day 0 patch. This is a small example of a larger problem that these kinds of games present to the industry at large and the media that covers it. Games used to just come out. The state the game was in when you bought it was the same state it would be a year later. However, things began to change in the early 2000s. While patches may have been around for a long time for PC games, the first console game to receive a patch was Unreal Championship in 2003. While patches have helped developers eliminate lingering bugs and issues in their games that somehow made it past QA during development, they've also become a crutch. Live service games are the direct result of patches becoming so commonplace in games that they become essential to the development and rollout. If you can make changes to your game at any point, you're a lot more likely to release an unfinished product, knowing that you could still fix it later down the line.
This feels like before the attack on Freemark.
The one that set off the Heart of Rage?
I don't really know the whole story.
But when should critics consider the game a finished product? The honest answer is that a live service game is only a truly finished product once it stops receiving updates. And the only reason that would happen is if the developers are releasing a sequel, as was the case with the first Destiny. Or if enough players lose interest and it no longer makes sense financially for the developers to support the game. The only reasonable solution, unfortunately for developers, is to review the game the same way you would for any other release and consider the game, quote, finished once it launches, even though we all know that isn't the case.
We have a deal.
Check out these other great clips from MojoPlays, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.